The fourth stage in the impact foundation is called asset. The asset stage is focused on asset protection. In other words, that means protecting what you've already got. Also, there's a number of strategies you can use from asset protection perspective. We'll talk specifically in this video about the three key areas that most business owners dismiss, but are the easiest to implement. These are risk management, financial controls, and diversification. Risk management in its simplest form is planning for every eventuality, identifying potential hazards, and taking the steps to reduce the impact on the business, should that event occur. Another term for this is called business continuity planning. Imagine every scenario that might be the business owner being injured and unable to work to a fire occurring in your business premises. The first step is to identify why that event might happen and what actions you can take to reduce the likelihood of it happening. Or alternatively, what actions you can take now to reduce the impact on the business if it were to happen. So an example, the scenario is the two owners of a business are involved in a serious car accident. They're unable to run the business for 4 months. The business is reliant on them. They control everything that happens day to day. They're in control of all finances, and they're the only people that with contact with clients. The normal outcome being that the business is unable to operate, staff cannot deliver to clients move elsewhere, staff and suppliers don't get paid, and the business goes insolvent. So the risk actions would be allocating responsibility to other persons, internally or externally to the business, have key person insurance, and have key persons travel in separate vehicles on high-risk days, for example. These are just a few of the actions that you might choose to reduce that potential impact on the business. Now, after imagining the event, now go into what I call day one mode. What would happen? Who would be responsible? Who is that responsible person? What would happen if that responsible person was unable or to do it for some reason? Maybe they was unavailable. Who then? After identifying the event, planning what would happen, and allocating responsibility, it's then time to train those individuals in a simulated event. When the simulated event is performed and everyone feels comfortable with their responsibilities, it's time to test the theory. Throw in a few curveballs for good measure. Simulate the event happening as if it were real. Switch off the power, cut off the internet, disconnect the phone system. What happens? Don't tell those involved that it's a test. Just let them get on with it and see how they cope. You don't need to do a full simulation. You obviously wouldn't set fire to your office, but when your staff arrive at work in the morning, you could lock the entrance door and tell them there's been a fire. No access available to anyone. Those emergency procedures should kick in straight away. From this practice drill, you'll see how people react under pressure. You'll see some crumble whilst others step up. Those that step up, are the ones that can lead the business. You'll also spot gaps in the training as well as opportunities for improvement. If nothing else, it will help each member of staff improve their problem-solving skills. As well as the obvious business continuity reason behind doing this, there's an element of legal responsibility on the business owner as well. If the event, something did happen, perhaps cause an injury or damage to another person, and it was discovered that you'd not trained staff or taken precautions, testing various scenarios, you could be held personally liable for breaching your responsibilities. There's also the issue of another company being damaged by an event, such as a client being impacted with loss of revenue or incurring higher costs. They might have a legal claim against your business. This can be as simple as them suffering a delay to a contract, such as a construction project or a disruption of service availability. Managing staff also connects us seamlessly to our next area of focus, which is diversification. Let's assume your biggest client makes up 40% of either your monthly or your annual revenue. What would happen to your business if something happened to that client? I've asked this to lots of business owners that rely on a large portion of their revenue coming from corporate clients. The general thinking around corporates, among all of these people I ask, they believe that such a large client will not go bankrupt. In this respect, I think that people, they might have very short memories and things always seem rosy when the sun is shining. The mind always finds evidence to back up its assumptions. This is called confirmation bias, and it's a very dangerous thing if you're not dealing with facts. We can often see large, high-profile corporate insolvencies as anomalies, a unicorn in the market, something that will never happen to our client. This comes from an emotional standpoint. They're so in awe of winning that large client, they're blinded from seeing the basic fundamentals behind that client's business. In many cases, if we spend just a few minutes doing some research, we might see lots of red flags for that client. Profit warnings, high levels of debt, court cases with suppliers, restructuring, finance directors resigning, making a loss on contract, liquidity ratios, poor credit scores. Ask yourself, if those same red flags were present in a small local business, would you be so keen to work for them? The sad fact is, if something happens with these clients, many small businesses wouldn't be able to recover. Is that blind naivety really worth losing everything you've built for? It doesn't need to be this way. If we're willing to be honest with ourselves, remove that emotional bias, stop the hero worshipping, and stop looking start to look at these basic fundamentals. If I was to tell you that your 40% client had an 87% chance of going insolvent in the next 3 years, would you be so keen to continue as you are now? Or would you prefer you do things differently, putting in place some actions to reduce that impact should it occur? We aren't just concerned with client concentration. The same diversification principle applies to sectors. Whilst sector diversification has a longer-term focus than client diversification, the risk normally rolls in longer cycles, such as an economic cycle. An example being, when the economy goes into recession, normally one of the first casualties of a recession is the construction industry. Customers don't have access to borrowing to pay for new buildings, so construction demand drops. If 50% of clients are in the construction industry, this means 50% of your business will be impacted when it happens. By diversifying across multiple sectors, if one sector is hit, in theory, that should mean the impact of your business won't be as severe. The last area is supply diversification. Less important than either client or sector diversification, but still needs some attention, especially if your business model is reliant on suppliers. Being reliant on one supplier, whether that's a service provider or a manufacturer, if something happens to that supplier, how will your business be able to continue? That doesn't necessarily mean them going insolvent, but it could just mean experiencing problems. Would you still be able to operate your business? What would the timescale and likely cost be to transfer to other suppliers? The other issue with supply diversification is if you're reliant on a single supplier, if that supplier reduces your credit terms, they can dictate whether your business lives or dies. Some basic rules to follow around diversification is, for clients, assuming you make around the same profit margin on each client, you should aim never to have any client make up more than 5% of your revenue, as an absolute maximum 10% of revenue. And the thinking behind that, most businesses average around 10% net profit after all expenses. So in theory, that profit should be able to cover any losses. If any of those clients don't pay for whatever reason, or the late payers. The sectors the biggest sector probably should be no more than about 30% of your total revenue. And you should always measure and keep track of rolling sales every month and every quarter, so you can see how sales are trending in the business for each sector. That way you can see if one sector is dropping and then investigate why that's the case. For example, if your business is made up 75% by a single sector and something happens in that sector, if that sector spend reduces by 10%, let's say, that is going to cause a major disruption to your business. You're going to have to make staff redundancies probably. Now, if your strategy is to break these rules because you're using that client or that sector to grow in a particular sector or location, so you're happy for it to break the rules, that's fine. But you need to register it as a major risk in your risk register. And the only real way to protect yourself is to hold a special fund, keep it to one side as insurance, just in case the worst does happen. And that way it won't impact the business as much. And the same goes with suppliers. You don't want to be tied to a handful of suppliers for everything. I'd say 20% should be your maximum spend with each one. Now, I know that that can be difficult because some don't deliver when they say they will, and that could hurt your own business. But then that's also the reason for having supply diversification, so that there's less chance of your business being damaged by these external threats. Okay, so what do you do if you're breaking these diversification rules? Well, first of all, you've got to note it as a risk and create a plan to minimize that risk with each one. But longer term, you probably don't want to turn away new contracts, but you also don't want to increase that risk by increasing how much that total revenue that they make up. So in the client example, for me, I'd keep a constant check on each of these clients, things like news alerts, court cases, financial ratios, credit scores. Dig deep into their accounts. Do whatever you can to be as informed as you can about them. The next thing is to build up your other clients, increase how much they spend. We've got strategies to do that very easily later in this program. After you've pushed your limits on that, then it's about bringing new clients in. Maybe you'll look for other very large clients like your biggest ones. So winning 4 or 5 of these bigger clients will help reduce the holding of each client. Overall, the more you can spread that risk, the lower the odds of it damaging your business. And the final strategy you might use is to look at existing businesses around the same size as yours and to look to buy them or merge with them. That way, by adding their client list to yours, it should also reduce each client value in your current business. The final area to think about is financial controls. How do you control what happens in the business if you don't have a set of financial controls or guidelines to work by? It's okay whilst it's just the owner working in the business, but as soon as you introduce staff to the process, you need some financial controls in place. The obvious example is when a member of staff buys from a supplier because they need something to do their job. Well, whether that's a ream of paper or a piece of equipment, without controls, anyone can purchase on behalf of the company, leaving you as the business owner to pay for it. When there's no financial controls, a member of staff will normally go to either the big name brand or to someone they know, a friend or a relative, rather than going to the supplier that you've already negotiated the best discounts and credit terms with. I've even witnessed ex-employees of a business go into a supplier and buy equipment, buy it on the company's account, and leave the business to pay for it. Now, whilst you could consider that to be theft, if there were controls in place, it would never have happened. But this isn't about purchasing controls. Who dictates what the largest contract you'll take on and who with who? Is there an approval process for large quotes or tenders? Is there an approval process for which clients you will work for and which ones you won't? Whilst a £1 million contract would look good to some people, if you don't have sufficient resources to deliver it or the capital to cash flow it, it could wind up being the last nail in your coffin. Then there's signing authority. Who has signing authority for purchasing, and are there levels by which a second person must also agree to the purchase? I know of one business which at the time employed about 8 staff. The business owner had some health issues, so he let the bookkeeper take care of the office side of things. This person had worked for him since leaving school about 30 years earlier, so he believed he could trust her. It turned out not to be the case. Over the course of a year, she embezzled over £1 million from that business, creating fake supplier invoices, approving them for payment herself, and then paying herself the money. They only discovered the problem when the business was struggling for cash, and they identified the business was on the verge of being insolvent. But of course, she disappeared by that point.